Welcome to the Customer Machine Podcast, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston and Yoav Ezer. Glenn is a psychologist and marketer whose companies have sold more than $30 million in consulting and has trained thousands of marketers across different niches and industries. Yoav is a programmer turned marketer whose companies have sold over $5 million in products and services. Together, they'll teach you how to systematically stand out, attract, and convert the best customers, even in brutally competitive markets. And now, here's Glenn and Yoav.
Okay, well, this is the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey,
and
Glenn.
I am here. Hey.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's okay, you can holla.
Hey, Glenn!
I wanted to talk about what I think was the best conversion example I'd ever seen, because we spent a lot of time talking about the principles of conversion, and I think one of the best ways to really get it into your soul is to take notice when you find yourself spending money on something you didn't expect to spend money on, especially when you felt kind of desperate to spend that money and you almost felt like you had to talk the vendor into letting you do it. And this was an example that set me up to do that. And so when I got back, I had to kind of step back and ask myself, well, what the heck just happened to me, and why was I so desperate to give this person my money? So a little while back, I climbed Mount Washington, which is the highest mountain in New England. And I'm in my 50s, and it was not an easy feat, but it only took me 3.5 hours, so I was in reasonably good shape. And when I got to the top, that's when I experienced the best example of the Golden Glove. And for those of you that don't know, the Golden Glove is a set of 5 principles, which you can remember like the back of your hand. Terry Dean and I came up with it. And whenever anyone is persuaded to do anything, including getting your child to make their bed or convincing your wife to take you to the movies, whenever anybody is convinced to do anything, these 5 principles are in play. And they are a desperate problem, unique promise, overwhelming proof, irresistible offer, and a reason to act now. And if your website is selling, then these principles are aligned in some way, and if it's not selling, then there's something wrong. A desperate problem means what is the problem that you address for your prospect. It's very clear what problem you're addressing for your prospect. And we call it a desperate problem because we believe that in the absence of people feeling desperate, that they're more eager to hold on to their money than to give you their money. And so you need to be able to conceive of what it is that makes people feel desperate enough to give you their money. Marketing is the process of making people who are not quite desperate to give you their money feel desperate to give you their money. A unique promise is just what it sounds like. It's the reason that your product is a better solution than any other product on the market, your product or service, for that particular problem. It doesn't have to be unique and better than everything else for other problems, but for that particular problem, you need to make a unique promise to be able to solve it. And then if you really do have a unique solution and a better solution for a very desperate problem, then you better prove it, because otherwise you're just teasing me. And so we're looking for overwhelming proof of your ability to solve that problem for that particular audience, for that particular market. Now, if you do all of these 3 things, you've successfully gotten me up on the fence, but you still need to make an irresistible offer, because if you're charging the wrong thing, or it takes so long to get it, or I don't trust you for some reason, if there's not an irresistible offer, then I'm not going to purchase. And we need a reason to act, because in the absence of a reason to act now, I'm a little more likely to put it off and make the decision later. And in sales, we all know that later means never. And so here's my example. Yoav, do you want to say anything before we go on?
Yeah, I have a question. But,
okay.
But feel free not to answer it. Could you go back to the previous slide?
Yep.
So if it takes us on a longer detour than you wanted to go down, then don't answer it. But What about entertainment products like movies and books and stuff like that? What's the desperate problem there?
I'm desperately seeking a change of emotional state. I need to escape my current life in some way and be absorbed in a world which will change my emotional state, allow me to vicariously experience the solving of problems that I have difficulty solving in my own life, which will give me the feelings and inspiration that I'm having trouble amassing in the course of my regular day-to-day life. Take me to another world. That's the desperate problem there.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Sorry, go on.
It's a good question. Okay, so I had busted my ass and hiked up Mount Washington in 3.5 hours. Anybody that's hiked Mount Washington knows that's a pretty good time, and I was absolutely drenched in sweat at the awe-inspiring top of the world, and I didn't have an ounce of energy left in my body because it's a freaking big mountain, and there's a lot of people in the summer hiking this mountain. I went on the Amanusic Ravine Trail. I'm actually doing it again with a friend later this week. There were gorgeous waterfalls and 80-mile vistas, and this fresh air is just amazing, and it pulls a lot of hikers along to the top. And what happens is a lot of people get so excited by all of this that they don't give much thought to the idea that they're going to have to hike back down, and your knees are kind of beat by the time you're at the top, and you're just exhausted, and you don't want to walk down this 6,000-foot mountain again. At the very top, a smart business group has constructed a Cog Railway, and it's the only way to get down to the same side that you came up on. There is a road you could drive down also, but it's the only way to get down without having to, have an hour-and-a-half drive or so to get to the other side of the mountain when you're on the bottom, without walking. So you get on the Cog, it's $45, it takes you right to the parking lot where your car is parked. You get an entertaining tour, you learn the history of Mount Washington and the Mount Washington Railroad, Mount Washington Auto Road, you learn the history of that as you're going down. It's kind of entertaining.
Nice.
And the alternative is to painfully walk down step by step.
Nice.
So they were literally the only game in town. Go ahead, Yoav, I'm sorry.
So they mitigate the anger you have for having to pay for the ride down with information, with explanation about the mountain. They let you convince yourself that you really want to take the tour and learn all those interesting things about the mountain. Nice.
Yes, exactly. What is the proof that they can actually deliver? For the 3.5 hours, or for many people, the 6 hours you're hiking up, you can see these trains are packed with people. There's like 150, 200 people on the train, and you can watch them going up and down the mountain as you're hiking. And obviously those people are alive, intact, and still smiling. And there's a demonstration, you'd call that a demonstration of effectiveness. And it's important from a marketing perspective to remember that a demonstration is almost always the best kind of proof you can present to the market. People think that the only real proof is a testimonial or a case study. But a demonstration of effectiveness, if anybody's ever seen the site Will It Blend, which kind of constantly demonstrates the power of these really powerful blenders by, I think they blend up wood and they blend up cardboard. It's crazy.
The one thing they didn't manage to blend?
What?
This action star, I forget him, Chuck Norris. They couldn't blend Chuck Norris.
They couldn't blend Chuck Norris?
No.
I don't get it.
Because Chuck Norris is tougher than anything. It's tougher than...
Oh, I see.
So,
that's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny. Yeah, and you could also see the sweaty, coal-faced engineers and some brakemen that are running the trains, and you kind of felt like you were back in the 1800s where everybody had to respect the guy who shouted, "All aboard." So they were using some authoritative positioning, and they were using a lot of social proof because you could actually watch the train going up and down the mountain, so you knew it would get you there. And for just $45, you can get out of hiking down and take a comfortable anti-turning ride instead. And I got to tell you that a bunch of the other sweaty old men, I certainly would have paid $100 without blinking an eye. There's a lot of people who are trying to prove themselves by hiking the mountain and really get themselves in trouble when they get to the top. And you say, oh crap, I'd better find a way down. So $45 was a truly irresistible offer.
Nice.
And it was an incredibly scarce offer where you felt a sense of urgency to run and get the very next ticket because every last train was completely full. And they always seemed to have to leave the station exactly on time. I don't know why they had to leave exactly on time, but those cold-faced engineers were very insistent upon it. Almost like the trains were going to start careening into one another if they got even 1 minute off schedule.
Right.
So they all left exactly on time, and you had to run from train to train. There were different loading docks, and get on the end of the line, hoping against hope that there was going to be room for you. And you started to feel like you were a second-class citizen. And the people who were willing to buy a round-trip ticket from the bottom, those were better customers, right? But you hiked up, and you're not going to give them $90, you're going to give them $45, and so you're taking your chances. You're really a second-class citizen. This is actually a marketing tactic which is very powerful. I don't endorse it or use it, but when you manage to position yourself so that your wares save the customer from feeling inferior, there's a very powerful motivation to purchase your wares. And as a second-class citizen, I couldn't buy a ticket unless and until the engineer gave me his blessing. So now, rather than them trying to convince me that I should purchase a ride down because it would be a really good thing, now I've got to beg. Now I've got to beg, and these engineers were kind of like gods. And to make things worse, you usually couldn't find the engineer. He would go in the post office on the building on top, or he'd be going to the bathroom, or he'd be coordinating things on one train or another. So you had to run around hoping you could find him, hoping you would get onto the right.
Let me get it. You had to buy a ticket from the engineer, which was never there because he was always doing stuff. And then you had to stand in line and hope you get a place on the train?
Yes. Exactly right. And this was fairly late in the day because I'd already hiked up the mountain and the last train was going down at 5 o'clock. So I was either going to get stuck on top of the mountain, and you can't really stay on top of Mount Washington. They were going to close the building, and the weather can turn in a minute on top of Mount Washington. You can't be there, when it gets dark.
Okay.
And
that's urgency for you.
That's urgency for you.
Death is definitely an urgent thing.
Death was chasing my back.
Yeah.
Death was chasing my back. And they don't take credit cards. You have to pay in cash. And they did have a handy-dandy ATM in the building if you didn't have enough time to, if you could have enough time to get to it and, in between running from platform to platform. It was crazy. It was absolutely insane. I was never in such a desperate rush to empty my wallet as when I was on top of the mountain like that. But it's a very, very good example. And I was finally blessed with the ability to buy a ticket and get a ride down. And the train was totally filled with soot, by the way, because it was a coal train, and when you're going down, the wind would be blowing back, and it must have been horrible for my lungs, and my face was all black. But I was happy to give him, I would have given him $100. I would have given my sister. Sorry, Lori, I love you, but, And then when I got down, I thought to myself, what the heck just happened? I really better step back and think about, what were the persuasive elements in force. And that's why I analyzed it using the Golden Glove, wrote a blog post, and made this video.
So the combination of all 5 elements really suspended your logical thinking, like you were just desperate to take to buy the ticket and get down the mountain. Amazing.
I mean, I could have walked at a more reasonable pace down the mountain. I could have walked. It's a pretty trail. I had my hiking poles, and I really didn't want to. I was really, really tired, but I could have done it. It definitely suspended my logical thinking.
So on top of having, so you had a pretty desperate part. It wasn't really a life or death situation, but it was a problem. And then the unique promise was that they had the only way down. They didn't require you to walk for 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And the proof that you had the ample social proof that really anyone that climbed up the mountain used the train to go down.
A lot of people did. There were people walking down, but you could see that, for the 3.5 hours I got to watch the train going up and down the mountain, so I knew that it made it.
Right, but then it became brutal when they started. So $45 isn't really a lot of money, and you probably would have paid $100, but $45 is really almost irresistible. But then they just totally drove the offer in by, it was late at the night, the evening was coming down, it's beginning to get cold. You have to run after you don't have time to make a decision, right? You need to run after the engineer to get the ticket, and then you have to stand in line. So there's no time to make the decision. You have to really act now if you want to go down the mountain. So it didn't become a question of whether you want to buy the ticket or not. It became a question of will you be able to make it in time? And that really suspended everything. Amazing.
Yes, and that's kind of powerful if you can change the prospect's paradigm from should I buy this or not to will I be able to buy this or not, will they let me buy it or not, then you're in a very strong position. So, and that's the example, it's a conversion example of the Golden Glove, probably the best one that I've personally experienced. I would challenge you all to think about the best conversion example you've ever experienced, and maybe even write it in the comments on this post.
And yeah, don't forget to download the starter package from the website and come back for the next episode.
Come back and see us because you know you miss us.
Right.
You know you do.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for your time and attention. For more information about the products and services we offer to help dramatically grow your business, please visit thecustomermachine.com. On behalf of Glenn and Yoav, thanks for listening.